Sometimes the path Allah chooses for us feels painfully slow, filled with turns we never expected. But what if every delay, every hardship, every closed door was simply Allah taking you the long way towards something far better? There are moments in life when a person feels as though the world is moving forward without them. New beginnings bloom for others, doors open effortlessly, and destinies unfold with grace, while they remain standing in the same place, waiting, hoping, praying for something to change. This was the quiet storm inside a man named Haris, a man who carried dreams with sincerity, but watched those dreams slip through his fingers again and again. He was not lazy nor careless nor ungrateful. He simply lived in a season when every path he took seemed to crumble beneath him. He prayed far with a trembling heart, asking Allah to make things easier. He worked long hours, believing that effort never goes unnoticed by the one who sees all. But life still felt heavy, like walking through sand with tired feet. Haris wondered if he was falling behind, or if Allah was gently steering him toward something he could not yet understand. People around him often said, "Maybe it isn't your time." And though he nodded politely, he felt a quiet ache inside. Because when you're the one struggling, patience feels harder than it sounds. But even in his moments of frustration, Haris never let go of Allah. He held on, even when a rope felt thin. What he didn't know was that Allah was not delaying to punish him. Allah was protecting him, shaping him, preparing him through a route that looked longer, slower, and more uncertain than he wished. A route that would one day show him why the shortest path is not always the best path. Sometimes Allah takes his servant the long way, because the destination is worth it. Haris lived in a small, quiet town on the edge of an open desert, where mornings carried the scent of sand and distant rain, and evenings were filled with the soft hum of life settling down. His home was simple, built with the kind of familiarity that reminded him of his childhood. A modest courtyard, a lone pomegranate tree, and the comforting sound of the wind brushing against the old wooden gate. It wasn't a house of luxury, but it held memories, warmth, and the remnants of dreams he once believed would come true quickly. Every day, he woke before dawn. He washed his face with cold water, feeling its sharpness pull him into focus, and he stood on the prayer mat, whispering his hopes to the one who never forgets anyone's voice. He asked for direction, for clarity, for way forward. But what he received instead were more tests, subtle, yet heavy enough to bend the heart. Haris had always been someone who worked with sincerity. He ran a small workshop crafting wooden furniture, chairs, tables, frames. His hands were steady, his craft was honest, and people admired his skill. But despite his effort, orders grew fewer. Weeks passed without customers. The world was moving fast toward modern machine-made goods, and the charm of handmade work was fading in his area. Still, Haris continued. He swept the floors, cleaned the tools, and polished unfinished pieces, hoping that perhaps today something would change. But day after day, the door remained still. The workshop felt like a silent witness to his quiet struggle. Sometimes on his walk home, he found himself watching others succeed. Friends opening new businesses, neighbors buying new cars, younger men traveling abroad for better jobs. He felt happy for them. But deep inside, a soft ache lingered, a feeling that maybe he was missing something, or that life had left him behind. Yet, Haris wasn't the type to complain. Instead, he carried everything in his chest, layered between faith and uncertainty. He reminded himself of the ayah, "Perhaps you dislike something while Allah places in it much good." But reminders are easier spoken than felt. Some nights, his heart felt heavier than his body. His mother, an elderly woman with a gentle voice, often watched him with concern. She didn't pressure him, nor ask too many questions. She simply made dua for him after every prayer, trusting that Allah never leaves a heart empty when it has relied on him fully. Haris sensed her silent prayers, and they comforted him. But they also made him wish he could do more, be more, provide more. Over time, the workshop wasn't the only source of struggle. Haris had been saving for years to propose to a woman he deeply respected, someone whose character had softened his heart and whose dignity had inspired him. But with business declining, his savings barely grew, and with every passing month, he worried that he would lose the chance to build a future with her. He felt as though life was placing him at crossroads without giving him a map. Should he continue the workshop? Should he leave his town and search for work in the city? Should he pursue something different altogether? The uncertainty felt suffocating, yet he remained patient. At least he tried to be. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low behind the desert dunes, Haris sat outside his workshop, letting the warm breeze calm his thoughts. He looked at the sky, a soft gradient of gold melting into orange, and wondered if his rizq was somewhere far away waiting for him, or if it would come to him when the time was right. He didn't know, but he whispered quietly, "Ya Allah, guide me to what is best, even if I don't understand it today." Not long after, a severe sandstorm hit his town. Winds roared like restless waves, lifting dust high into the sky and shaking the walls of homes. Haris rushed to his workshop to secure his tools and cover whatever he could. But no matter how quickly he moved, the storm had its own force. When it finally passed, his shop had been damaged. Windows shattered, tools covered in sand, half-finished furniture ruined. Standing inside the wreckage, Haris felt a sharp sting of defeat. It wasn't just a storm, it felt like another door closing. Another setback in a long list of setbacks. He cleaned what he could, but the weight in his chest only grew. For the first time in a long time, he felt truly at a loss. He felt like a man drowning quietly in his own life. That night, he sat on his prayer mat longer than usual. He didn't ask for wealth. He didn't ask for instant success. His heart only asked for one thing, clarity. Clarity to understand where Allah wanted him to go. And perhaps in that moment of surrender, something within him began to shift. Over the next few days, while repairing the workshop, Haris noticed something unexpected. His tools, old, worn, passed down from his father, had been pushed to their limits for years. The storm had damaged them beyond repair. His workshop wasn't just suffering from a lack of business. It was slowly falling apart. He had been holding onto something that no longer supported his growth. Yet still he hesitated. This workshop was where he learned everything, where his father once stood beside him, where passion had once lived. Letting go felt like abandoning a part of himself, but holding on to it felt like holding onto a sinking ship. Then something unusual happened, something small but meaningful. A man from another town visited Haris's workshop. He wasn't looking to buy furniture. He had heard that Haris was skilled with wood and asked if he would consider joining a newly opened manufacturing unit that needed experienced craftsmen. It wasn't in Haris's town, and it wasn't in his comfort zone, but it offered stability, growth, and the chance to build something new. Haris didn't agree immediately. The idea of leaving his town felt overwhelming, but the thought lingered, echoing gently in his heart. Maybe this was the direction he had asked Allah for. Maybe Allah was showing him a path, one he would have never chosen on his own. As he walked home that evening, Haris looked at the horizon, the same desert edges he had seen his entire life, and felt something unusual a slight pull, as if Allah was telling him, "The place you're afraid to step into is the place where your rizq has been written, but change requires courage, and courage requires faith." And Haris was about to learn that sometimes Allah takes his servant the long way, not because he withholds, but because he protects, not because he delays, but because he prepares, not because he wants to test how long you can struggle, but how deeply you can trust. The journey that followed would show him what he could not see yet, that Allah's timing is never late and his wisdom is never wrong. Haris spent the next week in a state of quiet contemplation. Every morning he walked through the remains of his workshop, touching the tools that once felt like extensions of his hands. They were rusted now, bent and worn, like soldiers who had fought too many battles. The storm had revealed the truth he had avoided for months. This place was no longer helping him grow. It had become a symbol of holding on to something whose season had silently ended. Yet, letting go was harder than he imagined. Each corner of the shop carried memories of his father, an honest man who spent years building a life through the rhythm of hammer and wood. Haris could still picture him shaping a piece of timber, giving advice in the pauses between every movement. This workshop was not just a place of work, it was the last piece of his father he had. But life has a way of nudging the heart, sometimes gently, sometimes through storms. And the storm that tore through his town had done exactly that. It had shaken more than dust. It had shaken his attachment to what he believed he needed to hold on to. Days later, he stood at the entrance of the workshop with the keys in his hand. The setting sun cast long shadows inside, making the room look both familiar and distant at the same time. Haris took one last look at the shelves, the bench, the carvings that would never be completed. Then, with a deep exhale, he locked the door. He didn't know if he was walking toward something better, but he knew he was walking toward something Allah had placed for him. And sometimes that was enough. With the workshop closed, Haris accepted the offer to visit the new manufacturing unit in the neighboring town. It was a 2-hour journey across a long stretch of road flanked by desert and fields. The drive itself felt symbolic, like crossing from an old chapter into a new one. The wind outside was fierce, but inside the car his heart felt strangely calm, like someone walking toward a destiny they didn't fully understand, yet still trusted. When he arrived, the unit was buzzing with life, machines humming, workers moving, materials stacked with purpose. It was nothing like his quiet workshop. It was larger, louder, and unfamiliar. But it carried something his old life no longer held. Opportunity. The owner walked Haris through the facility, explaining the operations, showing him the workstations, describing the growth they expected in the coming months. Haris listened attentively, feeling both overwhelmed and intrigued. Everything here was different, modern tools, structured systems, clear roles. He wondered if he would fit in, or if the world had moved too far ahead without him. But something happened during the visit, something subtle yet profound. As Haris watched the workers shaping wood with precision, guiding machines with steady hands, he felt a spark inside him. A spark he hadn't felt in years. The kind of spark that comes when a person sees their future reflected in something they didn't know they needed. This place wasn't taking him away from his craft. It was elevating it. But accepting the job meant leaving behind everything familiar, his town, his home, even the woman he hoped to marry one day. The decision felt heavy and the consequences unpredictable. But so was staying where he was. Haris realized that stagnation was also a kind of risk, one that quietly steals years from a person without them noticing. That night, he stood on a small hill overlooking the neighboring town. The lights shimmered softly beneath the sky, like scattered reflections of hopes he didn't yet understand. He thought about the dua he had made weeks earlier, asking Allah for clarity, and perhaps this was the answer. Not a voice, not a sign in the clouds, but a direction that only made sense when viewed with a trusting heart. Haris returned home feeling unsettled, yet strangely guided. Over the next few days, he prayed istikhara with sincerity, asking Allah to place peace in whatever was best. And slowly, without dramatic signs or sudden changes, a gentle calm began forming inside him. A calm that whispered, "Move forward." With that calm, he accepted the job. The day he moved, his mother hugged him long, her tears soaking lightly into his shoulder. She knew this was good for him, but a mother's heart feels every distance like a silent ache. Haris reassured her through silence, through the warmth of his presence, through the softness of his embrace. He promised to visit often. He promised to call daily. But deep down, he wondered how long it would take before she wouldn't feel his absence so deeply. His move wasn't easy. He stayed in a small rented room near the manufacturing unit. The walls were plain, the bed firm, the nights unervingly quiet. He missed the comfort of home, the scent of his mother's cooking, the birds that sang outside his old window. Yet he reminded himself that growth rarely happens in comfort. His first week at the unit tested him deeply. He made mistakes, struggled with machines he had never used before, and felt lost among experienced workers. There were moments he stood staring at unfinished tasks, wondering if he had made the wrong decision. Moments where the weight of starting over felt too heavy for his tired heart. But each night, he came back to his small room and whispered to Allah, "You brought me here. Make me strong here." And slowly, with each passing day, Allah opened doors he never saw coming. His craftsmanship, the skill inherited from his father, began to shine in the new environment. His steady hands created smoother finishes than machines could achieve. His eye for detail caught flaws others overlooked. Supervisors noticed his consistency, his patience, his sincerity. He was given more responsibility. Workers began admiring the precision with which he shaped even the simplest pieces of wood. Within months, Haris was offered a senior position, one that paid more than anything he had ever imagined having back in his old workshop. The rizq he had prayed for, cried for, longed for, had been waiting for him on a path he once hesitated to take. And then came the moment that opened his eyes completely. One evening, while sorting old records, he learned that the very road he used to take to bring supplies from the city, the road near his town, had been the site of a severe accident months ago. A truck had overturned exactly where he often traveled. The incident happened on the same day he had originally planned to go for supplies before the sandstorm destroyed his workshop. And in that moment, Haris felt a chill, not of fear, but of realization. What he thought was a setback, the storm that destroyed his tools, had protected him from a path he was never meant to be on. What he thought was a delay, the slow unraveling of his old life, had been Allah redirecting him toward a safer, better future. What he thought was loss was actually divine protection. He finally understood. Allah had taken him the long way, the unfamiliar way, the uncomfortable way, not to burden him, but to save him. Every unanswered prayer was not a rejection. It was a redirection. Every delay was a shelter. Every hardship was a form of mercy disguised as struggle. And the greatest wisdom is often revealed when a person looks back and sees how every closed door protected them from what they didn't know. Haris realized that Allah had written something for him far better than what he had been holding on to. And to reach it, Allah had to pull him away, gently, firmly, lovingly, from the very things he refused to let go of. The long way had been the best all along. Months passed. And the quiet transformation within Haris began to unfold in ways he had never anticipated. The man who once walked home with tired steps and silent worries was now walking with a heart steadied by certainty, not because life had suddenly become perfect, but because he finally understood the wisdom behind everything Allah had written for him. He had settled into his new role, earning more than he ever believed he could. But beyond income, something far more valuable had returned to him: confidence, purpose, and the quiet feeling that he was exactly where Allah wanted him to be. His hands, once worn by endless struggle, now shaped wood with renewed passion. His craft had not died, it had evolved. Every evening, as the sun dipped beyond the horizon, Haris sat by his small window and looked at the sky. He often remembered the days when he felt stuck, confused, and left behind. He remembered the storm, the broken tools, the empty workshop. He remembered the nights when he wondered why his du'as seemed unanswered. But now, those memories no longer hurt him. They guided him. On weekends, Haris returned to his hometown to visit his mother. The joy in her eyes soothed the last remaining pieces of his old worries. She saw the peace in him, peace she had long made dua for. She understood that Allah had taken her son through a path she herself could not have prepared him for. And she was grateful for a Lord who writes with mercy even when the ink looks harsh. One day, Haris walked past his old workshop. The building stood untouched since he had locked its door months ago. Dust had settled on the windows, and the pomegranate tree in the courtyard had grown more branches, stretching like a reminder of how life continues even when seasons change. Instead of sadness, Haris felt gratitude. The workshop had served its purpose. It had held his beginnings, shaped his character, and carried memories he would always cherish. But it was never meant to carry his future. Allah had written that elsewhere. Not long after, with stability in his life and a clearer heart, Haris gathered the courage to pursue the woman he once thought he would lose. With respect and sincerity, the families met, and within months, Haris was married, starting a home filled with warmth, faith, and the kind of peace that comes only when Allah brings two destinies together at the right time. He often reflected on how differently things might have turned out had life unfolded the way he wanted. If his workshop had survived, he might have remained stuck in a cycle of struggle. If his old plans had worked out, he might have missed the rizq that awaited him in another town. If Allah had granted him everything he asked for when he asked for it, he might have unknowingly walked into harm. But Allah, in his infinite mercy, took him the long way, a way that protected him, a way that matured him, a way that led him to a future far better than the one he was chasing. And Haris learned one of the greatest truths of life. When Allah takes something away, He is not depriving you. He is preparing you. He is redirecting you. He is saving you. And the path He chooses, even if it feels long, is always the one that takes you exactly where you were meant to be. Life doesn't always unfold the way we imagine. Sometimes the doors we want remain closed, the paths we choose collapse, and the plans we hold on to fall apart. But for a believer, none of this is random. Allah does not take you the long way to break you. He takes you the long way to build you, protect you, and guide you to a destination you would have never reached on your own. Remember, the delay you fear may be the protection you need. The hardship you question may be the mercy you don't yet see. The journey you think is slow might be the very path that saves your life. When you trust Allah's timing, you stop rushing life, and life begins to move with a wisdom far greater than your own. Ya Allah, grant our hearts patience when the journey feels long. Give us trust when we cannot understand your plan. Protect us from paths we're not meant to walk, and guide us gently toward what you have written with mercy. Replace our fears with clarity, our doubts with aman, and our setbacks with openings that only you can create. Ya Rab, make us content with your timing, grateful for your tests, and hopeful in every delay. And when you take us the long way, let it be a path that leads us closer to you, closer to peace, and closer to the destiny that was always meant for us. Ameen.